Mayor, I wanted to start by getting your take on the council did move ahead with open containers at the fair, right? Tell me about what that discussion was, and I guess what is and what isn't going to be allowed.
Well, it was a very interesting discussion we had. A year ago, they tried to get it just for the wine walk, or no, the Hub City Days at the time, and then that was a no-go. And then this year we had the wine walk, and that was downtown, and it went well. There was no disturbance. And the thought process is, if people go into an establishment and then they have a wine, and then all their friends are going to leave to go to the next store, so they quick guzzle that's going to have an impact, as opposed to letting them walk down and drink it. So we tried that at the wine walk. There was no incident. Everything went very well. Then we did it again at the car show this year. There was no incident. Everything went very well. There was nothing to report as far as were there heightened levels of people that had too much to drink or anything like that. So it went well. And so now they're taking a look at it now at the fair. And again, it's still going to be controlled, right? I mean, people are going to, yes, they're going to have the availability to have a beverage. But there's going to be police there and auxiliary watching it. So it's still, just because they're having drinks there does not mean that they can go and, if they've had too much, then that's a disorderly conduct. So we're going to try it at the fair. There were some that still had concerns. It's very common, my understanding from surrounding fairs, that this is something that they do. There are some people that have an argument that this is supposed to be a family situation where, you go on rides and things like this. It's a valid argument, but, families go out to restaurants and have drinks together. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. I hope people don't drink too much and then get on that big Ferris wheel, because you don't want to be at the bottom. But we're going to have to wait and see. What we're hoping is, and I believe most people are very responsible, and so might they go have a beverage and a brat? They very well could. So it's a wait and see to see how this goes.
Yeah, I think Bob explained it well. I think Rebecca Spiros brought up a concern that Bob mentioned about family friendliness, and that's always a balancing act. I mean, you certainly want the husband and wife and their two young children to come out and enjoy the fair. Certainly want those people to feel comfortable. And as she mentioned, the Midway, and it was clarified that the Midway will not be an area where open containers are allowed, because that's where oftentimes those younger families are walking around and getting on those rides. So I think it's one of those things that may need to be tweaked in the future. But I think sometimes we think that we're the only one doing something, and it sounds like that's not the case here. It sounds like there are a lot of fairs and festivals that do, to some limited degree, allow open containers. And the police department is going to be there in force, as they are anyway, ready to do what they need to address any concerns that come up.
Okay, anything else on that?
No,
Okay. So the other big one from Tuesday was discussing this restriction on using electronic devices, aka cell phones, at city meetings. And not just council meetings, but all city meetings, as I understand. Maybe just explain, what it all covers. What did you hear during that discussion, and where did it go? Where did it end up on Tuesday?
Well, it was surprisingly, I was surprised at this. It was met with reserve. And realistically, we as public officials are supposed to be there doing city business and have 100% of our attention to the city business. So, and the city provides the mayor and all the aldermen laptops. So everything that they have there to be going over city business is right there on their laptop. So there is an argument that can be made of, stay in your lane. The other thing it has to get to is just being very, very candid. It's just good manners, right? I mean, if city staff or somebody from the public during public comments, or maybe we ask somebody from the public to come up on, maybe we're talking about the pet shelter and Karen Rao is there. So we say, could you come on up to the mic? I believe that the last thing that we want to be perceived at as city council is, as somebody is speaking, somebody's sitting there on their cell phone. That just, the optics are bad. And the other side of that is then, does that device then become subject to open records? Because is there communication going on? Now, there's the other argument on the other side is, we're all responsible adults. And, you know, if we need to do something or ever, we'll do it in the confines. Well, you know, there's all kinds of things that can go on there. Basically, what we don't want to happen is somebody from the outside texting or instant messaging them and giving them information without the rest of the body understanding what that information is. That's a big deal. Mr. Witzel brings up the point, and I think a very good point, of we don't want to be the test case of, you know, because there were issues on this down in Madison. There were actually aldermen texting back and forth to each other. And there you run into an open records thing. So it did pass 8-2, Steve.
Yeah,
8-2. Steve brought up, you know, some guidelines, and then the vote was basically to send Steve back to the office and put it in proposal form to come back and be voted on. So for me personally, at the end of the day, we are given, as I stated earlier, we are given a computer with access to the internet of what we have right there. Really, what else do we need? And I believe that many of the aldermen feel that way, and some don't, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. For me, it's a manner of good manners.
Yeah, I think you hit on all the main key points. I would just add that the idea that people are not seen in a good light if they're spending time on these devices while others are talking, that's probably even more important than the open meetings issue. And, you know, Madison, they were clearly, you know, doing something blatantly wrong by texting one another, almost to the degree of, Fred, I'm going to vote for this, are you? Well, there's nobody would argue that that's legally wrong. But beyond that, just simply the optics of people talking at the podium, other council members talking, and here Bob and I are sitting there writing. Are we writing to each other? Are we writing to our families? Are we looking for a good deal on a plane flight to, you know, Florida? It doesn't matter at a point. It just looks awful. It just looks bad, as if the public and the participation is not even fully valid. And I don't think that's the intent of people who have done that maybe in the past, but that's the appearance.
So a lot of times we see, you know, at the state level or national level, bills come up because they're responding to something. Is this in response to a problem? Has there been a problem or a perceived problem with cell phone or, you know, electronic device abuse at meetings? Or is it getting in the way of city business that you've seen or noticed?
I've had it mentioned to me from members of the public, as well as other aldermen, that why are people on their phones? So is it a problem? No, I mean, we're not making any accusations or anything, but, you know, a lot of times, you know, many people think reality is reality, and that is true, but perception is reality. And so for me, like I said, it's more of a manners issue, you know. And I did a training for the city 3 weeks ago. It was very well received, and part of that was about communication. And you know, when you're standing there talking to somebody and then the person takes out the phone and then they're scrolling through whatever midst of your conversation, it's incredibly disrespectful.
Oh, yes. So
for me, it's more the respect of the other individual, whether it's city staff. City staff, they really do an incredible job preparing to go whatever they're going to prepare that day. And they give, you all see these packets. This last one was 197 pages. That, if they're presenting something that's maybe 20 pages long, You're talking about hours and hours of work, time and effort. And they want to present that and get everything out. You can imagine how they would feel if, as mayor, I'm up there on my cell phone flicking through this. That's not the message that we're about. And so this is a response. I don't know if it's necessarily a response. Maybe it's just a reminder that there's no reason for a separate cell phone. Now, can you have it there because in the event of an emergency, well, of course, but there's other ways to get a hold of us as well.
And the open records part is a big thing too. I mean, people think, well, I'm on my personal cell phone, I'm writing. Well, if you're at a public meeting and you're a public official, even that's subject to open records. So if you're writing to somebody, and let's say theoretically you're writing to somebody outside the building and saying, boy, they're talking about approving this, do you still have a concern about it if we vote for this? Or, do you think we should put a condition on it? I'm not saying anybody's done that, but just the perception when a citizen sees you texting or emailing on your phone or whatever, the thought is, beyond are you just not listening to me, are you actually doing something that you really ought not be doing? The input that comes into a public meeting should be public record. Somebody said it from the podium, or somebody gave it to us in advance so that letter went in the agenda packet. It shouldn't just be, well, the neighbors are concerned. Why? Well, I got a text that says that they said there's too much traffic. Well, I wish they were here at the podium to tell us what traffic they're seeing, but they're not, but you're telling me that they are because you're texting with them. Those are things that have never happened that I'm aware of, but you never want to even open the possibility to that type of dialogue.
And realistically, this, although I'm happy it's coming up, and I think it's a good reminder to us all, everybody can use good reminders on things. Everybody can. Realistically, what is going to come up is going to have no teeth. So nobody's going to be fined or put in the timeout chair, or you know what I mean? It's like, but it's more or less, it's a matter of manners. And then, if it would persist, we might have to call people out on that. Not something we want to do. We've got bigger issues to deal with than that.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. What is the enforcement side of this? Is there any enforcement? I don't know, Steve.
I was asked by one of the elected officials after the meeting why there's no enforcement mechanism. Is there a fine? Is there whatever? And it's interesting with elected officials, because when you talk to elected officials about how they do things, sometimes they'll remind you, not in a mean way, but they'll say, I'm accountable to the voters. You work for us, and your administrative assistant works for you, but we work for the voters. So, that's who we respond to ultimately. They can vote us out of office if they don't like what we're doing. What you hope you do is get buy-in, where you get the body saying, the use of electronic devices for things not related to the meeting is just inappropriate. But I think the mayor just said it really well. If this were to continue or persist or increase, I think the body could certainly put a mechanism in there to, subject itself to some kind of penalty. I don't know what that would be. We just hope and pray that doesn't happen. We're all adults here, and we ought to behave like adults. And when a policy is adopted by you and your peers, you darn well ought to be adhering to it. And we're hopeful, and I think confident for the most part, that will be the case.
And there are differing opinions, and I believe that all the aldermen, they're entitled to their opinion and the way they handle themselves. That is by their choice. But all of their voices need to be heard. There are some that think that this is silly and really want nothing to do with it. They're adults, they can handle themselves. And that is their opinion, and that opinion should be respected. There are others there that you saw the other night, if you watched the meeting or were there, that said we should take all the cell phones before we go in and put them in their mailboxes, or put them in a box and lock them. And that is their opinion. And as Steve said, what we're hoping here is that the consensus, that we're all on the same page. You might have it there with you. Just maybe wait to review what is going on at the break or something.
So are cell phones subject to open records requests, or can the city administration ask for, okay, it's cell phone check time. Can we see if you have been in violation of, something? Have you been texting constituents or others outside of the meeting during meetings? We're gonna check the timestamps on those. We're gonna see if you've been violating the open meetings law. Can you do a random check on this stuff? Is the public entitled to see those, whether it be a city-issued cell phone or a personal cell phone? What is the rule on that kind of stuff?
Well, we can. I believe we can do that at any time, Mike. We normally would only do that if we had reason to believe that there was something happening. The same way, every city employee has a computer. And, theoretically, right now while we're having this conversation, somebody could be spending too much time looking at, like I said before, best airfare to Florida for their vacation next summer. But when we become aware of someone, either that we need some records that are being requested by the public, or if we become aware that somebody maybe is improperly or abusing in some way their use of city equipment, whether that be a city-issued laptop or a city-issued cell phone, or I guess if we had reason to believe that someone was doing things on their personal phone, we might get into that. We're not looking for it. But when we become aware of it, we would certainly deal with it. And we do want, every time somebody comes out of the council or a new mayor, I do sit in a room with them and I talk about some of these things. We'll probably cover some of these things at the September 4th presentation by Ed Miller from UWSP about ethics and conflict of interest. He'll talk about open records too. You have to realize as a public official that you're not doing these things in private, that if you're on your phone, whether it's personal or if you got a city cell phone for your work, and you're writing, boy, let's not vote for this, or that developer is crazy, that you're not doing this in isolation. That somehow or another someone could say, I want all the records of the conversation about development XYZ, and that's going to come back at you. So, I mean, again, we're all big boys and girls, or we're supposed to be big boys and girls. But what you do could come back at you if you're having conversations about things that are not appropriate to be having electronically.
So in other words, if an alderman just happened to stop at City Hall and Steve Barr just happens to be walking by the front counter, oh, I'm glad you're here. Let me see your cell phone. I'm going to randomly check it. Are you able to do that?
I can't imagine us doing that.
But I mean,
without, we're not. We're not. It's not probable cause like the police department, right. But I don't think we would do that without some reason to believe that person was having communications that they probably shouldn't be having with citizens or developers or somebody else.
I was just curious.
Yeah. No, and I've been told there were situations in the past, I don't know this for a fact, in which there might have even been some dialogue between people on the council and a staff person in the audience electronically. And I could see where you would do that. You would think maybe, could we even approve a condition like this on a permit? And then the staff person might say, no, that would be illegal. In a way, you might think you're helping city business get done, but you really, everything in public meetings ought to be done publicly. That's what it is, it's a public meeting.
So at that point, you were just, instead of texting, we'll call into the microphone.
Yeah, you could say, hey, Josh, could you come to the podium? If we add a condition like this to this permit, is that lawful? Is that something that would pass the test of if it went to court? Or the same thing with HAP. You ought not be writing about it. Even if you think that if I can just get the simple question answered, then I know what I'm going to say next when I push my button down. That's not for you to determine.
So in other words, you guys sort of operate in the area of if it's going to be public record or kind of legal, or if it is going to count as public input or whatever, it has to be said out loud. Is basically the general rule. Yeah,
picture yourself at the meeting or watching on TV. Can I fully understand what's going on? Now, admittedly, we get letters when somebody wants to. 8th and Hemlock is an example. That property that we're trying to sell. Somebody might have sent a letter saying, "Look, I live in that area. Please don't put more houses there. Sign Joe Smith, whatever." And we actually put that in the agenda packet. The council and the mayor see it because he gets it to us in advance. We don't necessarily read those, but at least it's something that the person could go online and see the agenda packet or ask for an agenda packet and be privy to. Electronic conversations going on, offline during meetings is not something that anybody can be privy to, and that's simply not a public meeting.
Anything else on that? Okay. I was going to ask about, then the council, mayor, I think, did sign off on the master plan for the clinic, and it sounds like they've got some pretty aggressive things planned for that medical complex. right? That did pass.
Yeah, it did pass, and we weren't really expecting any problem, even when it went through Planning Commission. I think what I'm most intrigued about is I think it put a lot of nerves at ease to see that there's some things that they're going to do starting in spring, putting in a new walkway around the back so they can transport patients and stay within the HIPAA rules of privacy and whatnot. That's a big investment. So, we know we've learned that they're in negotiation with Gunderson and everything, and so that's been good. But that's going to take a long time. That's not going to. I don't think they're going to have it all wrapped up by the fall. So they're moving ahead with things, and many of them are very aggressive. So I'm glad it passed and went through good discussion in Planning Commission. When it went through the first reading, there was good discussion, so it was good that it passed.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, again, from the standpoint of city staff, it's so good for planning purposes. We've talked for years about all these campus master plans with the fairgrounds, with the airport, with whatever. None more important than the medical complex. If we know that in 2023 you're likely to expand this building and it's going to cause an issue over here with the entrance off of Upham or whatever, we can plan for it. We can say, look, let's look at our 5-year city plan. We better be ready for the fact they might be asking for a new turn lane in 2023 or 2024. That's critical to us. That's critical to us for really getting ready for those days from an expense standpoint, from an infrastructure planning standpoint. And so we're so grateful to see that they've kind of laid it out. Now, will everything happen exactly in the year that they said? Probably not, because everything the city, when we say we're going to redo a street in 2023, it might be 2024 or 2022, but it's good to lay it out and say, this is what we're really intending to do. So city, be ready and tell us what you need from us, in order to help accommodate where necessary.
Okay. Did you have anything? Did you want to bring anything up?
For that in particular? Or I was just curious about closed session, rather than closed session, if there's anything you're able to share.
Anything else from open before we get to?
Yeah, I did actually have a question about that. Could you just summarize did the council approve, there was 16 million in borrowing?
Yeah.
What was that for?
15 million for 75, and that was basically to refinance
A lot of it.
some debt.
Okay, that wasn't.
It was nothing new, but I will tell you what, we did a lot better.
Oh my gosh.
A lot. We're saving a ton of money out of that. Just right from when they made the quote to us a couple of weeks ago till now, we saved $475,000. And the interest rate we got, the other very good thing for us as a city is normally on these bond issues, if you get 3 to 4 bidders, that's considered good. We had 7. And so that is a very, very good thing for us on the way we look at it. We know that our Moody's rating took a hit. We had all factored that in with the issue that we had before. But we have enough very positive, what I'll call compensating factors that show an awful lot of strength to the city. And so I believe that once we get through our budget, see where we really are, see what kind of hole is ultimately created and now fixed, I believe we'll get our Moody's rating corrected in the next couple of years. But our TIDs are all doing very, very well. That was a big win. That was a big, boy, I'll tell you save that amount of money and get that kind of interest rate in that period of time. And I believe that the gentlemen from Ellers and Ron are doing an amazing job with everything going on. So it was nice to save that amount of money, and it was nice to get that low of an interest rate.
Let me just add on the bond rating thing. We had a long conversation, a long conference call with, her name was Katie from Moody's, and Ellers staff, Dave Ferris and Phil Costin were on the line, along with Ron and me, and Josh Miller, our economic development person, was there. And they greatly respected what we're doing, that we're taking all the right steps. They said, we're not sure that we're going to be able to hold your AA3 rating because of some of the numbers where they sit today, and we have to evaluate those numbers as they are. But they definitely indicated that with the steps you're taking in the next 2 or 3 years, we can see you moving back in the direction of a AA3, and they saw positive steps being taken in the direction that they want to see as an investment group. So even though it did take a notch hit, which we didn't like, they definitely overall see our forecast as being headed down the right path.
So the 15,955, was that just all basically consolidation and refinancing of debt?
Probably about 2/3 of it. You know, every year we borrow about $4 million for capital work. It's largely streets. I'd say streets are about 75% of it. There's other projects, maybe larger park projects, or this time we'll be borrowing some money for some of the design work on the pool project. But, you know, 80% roughly of the cost that we borrow for is major street work. The other, you know, 10 million plus was largely refinancing old debt issuances. Not all of it, but a good deal of it. From 2009 and 2010, some of those that were, you know, I think 6% interest or something like that. And it's very similar to looking at refinancing your home mortgage, where you look at the difference and you say, my gosh, we can get down to 2 point whatever. This is the time to refinance all that. You know, and I think I agree with what Bob said, that we definitely, you know, Dave Ferris from Ellers and Ron Ullman, our finance director, did a marvelous job. I will also add to that, though, that we, you know, sometimes part of life is being lucky. And we've hit a very good moment in August of 2019 in the bond market as far as interest rates. And he showed us a graph that indicates that, you know, getting down to around 2.15 is you know, pretty good, and it's a good point on the curve. So it all came together for us. And like I said, even the one-step drop in our bond rating was given to us with some positive feedback about the future and future expectations from us.
Just as an example, this agenda, I believe, was made up on Thursday, or the numbers were on Thursday and sent out to the public on Friday morning. And the bond sale was actually on Friday. And so the amount that, because of the savings on the agenda at 15,955, and it was actually ended up being 15,475 because of the lower rate and fees and whatnot. So that's it's a significant thing, which Ron and our city staff, a lot of people worked on that throughout the staff, and again, did a great job.
And let me add, talking about Ellers for a minute, you know, I don't want to say anything negative toward PFM, our former financial advisor. They did a great job for the city for 2 decades, but sometimes that fresh pair of eyes, you know, is so important. And Dave Ferris and Phil Costin have just come in aggressively ever since they first started communicating with Ron and me. Hey, we can make a difference here. Let's look at your borrowing. Let's look at your debt rating. Let's look at your long-term financial planning. Let's take a look at all the funds you manage and where they sit. Let's talk about ways to move money around more effectively. Let's talk about your TIF districts. You know, let's look at the entire picture in a very comprehensive way. We're working on a 5-year financial plan that we expect to draft next month. That is going to, I mean, it's going to have a little bit of pain in it. It's going to have a little bit of, you know, how you get through the next few years of changing course. But oh my gosh, these guys have helped us so incredibly much. I don't think the council and the mayor could have made a better decision than for us to go with Ellers at the point in time that they did, and they're doing great work.
So you said one-step drop in the rating. What is the new rating, and what impact does it have on what you're able to do? Any impact?
You know, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me, because these letters are so, you know, you talk about AA and AA3 and 2. I believe the next step down was, I think it might even be A1, which sounds like, if I said you're doing an A1 job, you'd probably figure you were at the top of the heap.
It's pretty good.
But I think that's actually, you know, one step below the AA3. And it doesn't make a lot of, I mean, what it means theoretically is when you borrow money, you may see a slight increase in basis points that you have to pay, and you may sometimes see fewer bidders interested in your bonds because you don't look like as quite a solid a prospect to purchase those bonds. I think the fact that we got a 2.14 interest rate and we got 7 bidders was outstanding. You know, could it have been 2.03, or, you know, would we have 9 bidders if we were AA3? We'll never know. But I don't think it's quite as concerning as you might think. Although we did covet for a few years the AA3, and we'd like to be back by, you know, 2022 or something like that, back on that platform. I don't think it hurt us measurably here. We did very well.
That's all I have.
Sorry.
Oh. So then you just want to close session?
Yeah, if you're ready for that.
Closed session?
I don't think we can say too much. Nothing came out of it in terms of a public action. Obviously the possible litigation one I can't talk about, and even the acquisition of property in the downtown area, I really can't. The one thing I'll say about the project in TID 10, it's the mall project, and I can say that in part because it's been public. The developer has come forward and said, look, malls are not doing well across the country, including your area with Wausau and some other places. I went to the Eau Claire Mall with my wife about a month ago, and it's still hanging in there, but it's got its challenges. So he's got kind of a new way to look at it, a new way he believes he can attract some realtors that might fit in a city of 20,000 in central Wisconsin. So we're talking with him about some ideas, and some public assistance has been requested. I'm hopeful, from what I'm hearing and from what the council is saying, that we can reach an agreement to provide some limited assistance and help a project get off the ground that's going to really juice that place up. The loss of JCPenney and Yonkers, how big was that? I mean, Yonkers was 52,000 square feet. So that's a lot of area to fill. But he's got some possibilities, and I think if we work together, he may be able to pull these through. Ned Brickman of Midland Management has done this in other places. They've done a similar type of thing in Marinette, where they've been able to kind of rejuvenate some retail space. And I would like to think in the next 30 days or more, we may see hopefully something positive come to pass.
And there's a time frame there that that the folks that are looking to open up want to be opened up quickly. I believe the first quarter.
Yeah. Well,
so there's
certainly by spring.
By spring. So certainly there's some sense of urgency there, but I will tell you it's very exciting. I think it would be a very good addition, and I feel like we're going down the right path, and I'm sure we'll have an update from them by our next council meeting.
And I'm just going to add to this, and I'm going to try not to say more than I can say, but we are looking more and more at creative ways to help developers. I know sometimes cities think that, or citizens think that, well, you go to the city and they give away the farm or whatever. I think we're being more scrutinizing, have been recently, and will continue to be, how can we help a development get off the ground? How can we make something happen and yet make sure that we're doing it, we're structuring it in a way that best suits the needs of the city and its taxpayers? So please know that Bob's doing a great job of this in leading these discussions, and the council right along with him. We want to help. We want them all to be successful, but we have to be prudent with our finances. So what can work for both sides? And those discussions will continue in the future with other developments. It's a public scrutiny thing that we need to make sure that we're helping business develop, but we're doing it wisely.